I want to talk about stress, anxiety, and depression and how it impacts business people, entrepreneurs, people inside companies, etc. First, I need to disclaim that this is not in any way medical advice. None of this is professionally given, and you should definitely seek medical attention if you feel like you're suffering from anxiety and depression. That out of the way, I also want to point out that what we're talking about isn't just like when you feel a little bit of stress or feel a little anxious or that temporary depression, but the chemical kind, the kind where even if you don't feel like you have any particular reason to feel anxious or depressed, you do. And I want to talk about this because a lot of people don't. And a lot of people, there's a stigma, it seems, to people that they can't be a good functioning member of business and society if they also deal with these challenges. I can tell you that it's nerve wracking to say to somebody, you know, sorry, I didn't quite get that handled, as fast as I wanted to. I didn't reply to your message as fast as I wanted to. I've been dealing with depression. And so sometimes that makes me sort of jettison the less, important things or whatever. You kind of can't do that, right? You have to really try to keep your client base in check, or your coworkers in check or whatnot, and handle things. But when you're dealing with anxiety and depression, sometimes what you can least do. With entrepreneurship, for instance, running my own business, there's lots of times where you can start to fall into this. You can start to say, man, the phone's not ringing. I'm not getting the callbacks that I need. I'm not getting the attention I need. I'm trying to put out this product and service that I think is really useful. And, I'm hearing crickets. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm bad. Maybe I've lost it. You start saying all these things because one of the biggest truths about depression is that depression's a liar. And depression is so anxious to tell you a bunch of bad things. I always tell people that when you're going through depression, when it's been more than a few days and you're really kind of in the bottom of it, you have to remember that depression lies, and it will say some horrendous things to you. And it's important that you realize that that's almost never true. Never, never, never the big stuff, but then even the little stuff is almost never true. What do you do with it all? What do you do to deal with it? How do you improve your status with it and whatnot? Like I said at the beginning, this is not official medical advice. You should always go see a medical professional. But when I say that, you need to understand something about how mental health is treated, at least in the US, but in a lot of parts of the world for sure. Mental health is treated as something very secondary, very not that big a deal, or maybe people can just get it together, or it's medicated with very blunt instruments that don't necessarily work the same for all people. Depression meds, for instance, there are meds, there's a whole bunch of them called SSRIs, which something serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It basically keeps chemicals from working in a certain way, and it's supposed to fix depression. In some cases, it does. In other cases, it fixes depression with a side order of making you fatter and you lose your sex drive. In other cases, it impacts your memory. And there's all kinds of weird side effects because, drugs have side effects. It's just kind of part of the deal. Different ones work more effectively than others, and different ones have sort of different play and whatnot. And when you look at, should I be medicated to deal with depression or anxiety? If the answer is yes, well, then there's other challenges that go with that. Are you ready for these side effects? Are you ready to sort of change how you perceive yourself? Another challenge, if you suddenly are a person on meds for something, you start to feel like you're going to be perceived in a different way. There's so much to it. I bring this up because I want us, we professionals, we people dealing with this kind of thing, to stop being so worried about it, or stop being so, affected by it, to think that there's such a big stigma. It's okay to deal with depression or anxiety or stress. And it's okay to, if you need to get on medicine, to get on medicine. That said, there's all kinds of other things you can do and might do to look into helping yourself a little bit more. Number one, best solutions for dealing with depression, once you're back to somewhat chemically level, like, if you're in the bottom of it, you can't help it. But once you're somewhat chemically level, really good sleep, number one. Number two, some exercise. It can even just be going out for a brisk walk for half an hour every day. Some getting out of the house. Number three, working on learning how to chunk your life and chunk the execution of what you have to do into smaller bites. What happens with anxiety and depression is that you tend to look at a problem that you're facing and then overlay all of the other problems that you're facing and thinking in a much larger sense about all the challenges you have. And that, of course, doesn't help you, and it doesn't make anything work any better. And the real challenge, or the real opportunity with dealing with anxiety and depression, is if you can shrink stuff down a little bit more, if you can make it a little bit more chunked in your life, if you can sort of modularize your life, that helps. Another thing is, if you can make sure that you, especially for anxiety, if you can try to keep your plate cleaner instead of more full. Everyone out there is trying to hustle and trying to be busy and trying not to sleep because you're being told by other people like that's a cool way to be, or that's a good thing to do and all that. And it's not necessarily the way for everyone forward. I tell people, and I have for a very long time, that I schedule my day to 40%. 40%. That means 60% of my day has nothing in the schedule. And by the way, some days it has 0%, and some days I get really busy and it might be 60 or 70% full, right? But I schedule my days to 40%. And the reason is because that way, if something bad happens, if something falls on the plate, then I can pick it up and I have the room and I don't get pushed into anxiety and pushed into depression because, oh no, there's too much there, right? If you think about this in a workplace environment, if you're the boss and not the actual person dealing with depression, you start to say, oh, I wonder if there's ways I can chunk this project when I task this other person with it so that they don't have that problem. If you're the boss, I wonder if I can chunk my process so that it doesn't have this problem. You really need to work on how you structure things, because the biggest challenge with when you get into a state of depression or a state of anxiety is you have to care for yourself first. You have to get way back to your baseline bottom level and then get going again. Depression's about not really feeling like getting out of bed, not feeling like taking a shower, not feeling like doing the most basic things, not being with people. You feel yourself distance from people, you isolate from people, and it's really tricky. I'm an introvert on my best days, and when I'm dealing with depression, I want nothing to do with anybody. And so obviously in a lot of professional circumstances, you can't be that way. You know, a lot of times if you have clients or you have other duties to deal with, you can't really afford that time away. And so you have to look at, how am I going to handle these things when I'm in that negative state? And so, well, I don't know. I'm going to call it a negative state. I was trying to think of maybe being earthy and be like, depression's not negative. Depression is negative. Depression's an ass, right? So let's just call it what it is. With anxiety, one of the most important things I've learned about anxiety, besides breathing, getting great sleep, and trying, when I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety, then I try to cut caffeine back a little bit. I never ever tell people cut caffeine. I think caffeine's a crazy underrated drug for handling certain things. But when I'm dealing with anxiety, one thing I like to do is get myself down to really small, work on this, then work on this, then work on this. Lists are your best friend when it kind of deals with anxiety, as long as you only put a little bit in the list at a time. That's the challenge, is we tend to put everything in all the time. If you ever have lived in a place where the front door and your vehicle are not that close to each other, and you've had to lug groceries up at the same time, if you've ever watched most people, they like to take all their bags at one trip. And I am absolutely the king of this. If I could put, a bed on my back and, a couple of couches and stuff, I would move furniture all in one trip too. I think that where that falls down is when you're dealing with things like anxiety and depression. You really need to get, smaller chunks and all that. We wouldn't do this to a kid, right? We wouldn't tell a little kid, all right, you're going to get piano lessons. Well, here's Rachmaninoff. Let's start here. No, you start with, here's the notes. Here's what C looks like. Here's what E looks like, right? So why would we do that to ourselves as grownups? It's certainly not because we have so much more capability and we should be handling it more. I want to finish with talking a little bit about, how do you talk to or deal with your friend who is dealing with anxiety or depression? With depression, my thing I most want to hear as many times as I can is, depression lies. The other thing is, and this is the easiest thing you can ever do to anyone you suspect might be dealing with depression. This simple. Call them, text them, send an email, tweet them, I don't care what. Just, hey, I was just thinking about you. Wanted to let you know I think you're awesome. Just checking in. How are you? What's going on? Say, would you like to get on a phone call or something? Offer the opportunity to connect. When we deal with depression and or anxiety, you kind of want to be away from people. It's okay. When you deal with depression, you start to think nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I'm going to go eat worms, right? So you need that sense of somebody coming along and offering to connect with you a little bit. It helps. Now, it's important you don't push to solve anything. You're not there to help in that way. You're just saying, hey, I'm just here. I just want to hear what's going on. You want to get some lunch? Just the real basics. Because when you're dealing with depression, you're at the real basics level, and that's where you need to be for that time. It's okay. And I guess I wanted to leave it there, but I want to say one last thing to people dealing with depression, anxiety, and high stress is it's okay. It's okay that you have this. It's okay to admit that you're dealing with it. If you go to see a professional and you get checked in about, what you do and don't have going on, that's good. It's a good start. It's not weakness. Depression isn't weakness, right? I mean, I take on a lot of responsibilities. I have all kinds of things to deal with. I have my own business stuff to run. I have financial stuff that I need to deal with. I have kids. I have a beautiful fiance, and we have her daughter. And there's so much to look at. My parents, there's just so many things that I have to take on. And that's okay. When I'm dealing with depression, I have to take a much smaller bite of all that, and I'll get my way through it. It's all good. You're okay if you have depression. You cannot use your depression as an excuse. You can't use anxiety as an excuse. I have depression and I'm a business professional is the way you've got to look at it. Always open to talk with you about this. So grateful for your time. Just send an email. It's not super hard. It's right there. See, Chris@chrisbrogan.com. You can send it right to me. Always happy to talk with you.